hello from the Quaker Council for European Affairs. The world over, many individuals and organizations have been working on social justice, on equality and human rights. And here at QCEA, we believe that hearing and learning from other perspectives and experiences can only enrich the work that we are doing. So today I'm with Adwoa. Adwoa, I'll let you introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about you.
Good morning. My name is Adwoa Kwateng-Kluvitse. I am the head of Global Advocacy and Partnerships at the Foundation for Women's Health Research and Development, better known as Forward. We are a campaign organization against FGM, child marriage, and gender-based violence. We've been in existence 36 years, and I've been on that journey with Forward almost from the beginning.
Right. So, as you mentioned, you work with an African women-led organization on human rights, and you are based in Europe. There are not many such organizations. So my question is twofold. Why do you think this is, that you are such a rarity? And what do you think an organization like yours brings to the conversation on human rights and equality?
Why are we so few? That's a multifaceted question. I think there are many reasons, both from within and without. Let's start from without. I think there's a perception, a very wrong perception, that African organizations in general are incompetent, unprofessional, unable to be objective, particularly when we are working on issues that affect our communities. I think also there's the lack of networks and patronage that a lot of other white organizations have, simply by virtue of them being in the mainstream communities. This is a very wrong perspective. Africans are no more corrupt than anybody else. There's no way that anybody can tell me that organizations, politicians, leaders, individuals in Europe, in the mainstream communities, are not also as corrupt as us. I mean, if you look at what happened with the INGOs in terms of the sexual harassment and the sexual abuse, it is very clear that those organizations are as vulnerable to flaws as any other NGO. But somehow that issue that affected so many women on a very personal level seems to have died away. It died away very quickly, considering that we're talking about coercive rape, in effect. So I think that perception and that perspective needs to be challenged. I also think that there's a view that African women somehow should be submissive, that organizations that stand strong for the issues they believe in are considered to be very much non-stereotypical and almost a threat. So if you look at, for example, using Forward, an example, and other African women's NGOs who started the work challenging female genital mutilation 30-something years ago, we really struggled. But as soon as the issue of FGM became accepted, you saw the white big NGOs coming in and claiming that space and being able to secure lots of funding because, one, they had the infrastructure, they had the links, they were seen as a safe pair of hands. But people forget that it was organizations like ours who started. And we are one of the few NGOs that still left African women-led working. We've been pushed out. The majority of NGOs who started the campaign have been pushed out because now other bigger NGOs with supposed track records have taken over. And that links to the other question you asked. What do we have to offer? And I think what we have to offer is very much a nuanced understanding of the issues that affect our communities and a lived experience working with and for our community. We also have a very good understanding of where the African feminist perspective, how and where we need to use that will help us to make the lives of African women and girls safe and dignified. I also think we bring to the table an understanding of the intersectionalities. We are African women, we are refugees, we are migrants, and all of those dynamics have a role to play in ensuring that we achieve what we want to achieve. So I think that's what we have to offer. And I think that the value of our lived realities is often very much undervalued.
How, I guess my follow-up question then, how do you push back? How do you carve that space for yourself, and how sometimes, I guess, you might have to challenge more or less directly, oh, is it a case of negotiating? How do you manage to exist in that ecosystem then?
It's very difficult. I will not minimize the stress that causes. You are almost always swimming upstream against a wave that wants to go the way it wants to go. It's easier to continue doing things the way it has always been done. And it's very difficult sometimes for funders to recognize that you need to do something differently, something really almost scary, to invest money into something that you perhaps can't really see, but that is what will make the change. And to be honest, if we don't do that, we're going to carry on doing the same things we've always done and getting the same poor results we've always had. So we really need to make that step change so that we can actually see a more equitable world. And that's what we all want.
So you mentioned change. So you've been working with Forward for a number of years. And from what I know of your journey, yes, this is social justice, equality. This is a topic that you've been working on in different capacity. So what change have you seen in you through career? I mean, and any, because sometimes we think that change has to be positive, but change can also be, backlash is also change. So what have you seen? What has changed?
I think there have been quite some positive changes. I mean, one of the changes that is very evident to me is now the issue of, I don't think you go anywhere and you say FGM and not everybody understands what it was. When we first started, I had to say it all out, female genital mutilation. And the response was always, what's that then? Now we don't have that issue. We talk about child marriage. When Forward held the first technical consultation in Ouagadougou, even then, child marriage wasn't on the agenda. Now, child marriage is on the agenda. Everybody's talking about it. We've got organizations, big organizations working on the issue. What needs to come onto that agenda is the issue of child mothers. Yes, it's fine to work to prevent child marriage, but people tend to forget that there are millions of child mothers in the world, and they are falling through the net. They are neither children, neither are they adults, but they have a special, they have special needs, special issues that we need to address with them. That includes schooling, it includes empowerment, it includes economic empowerment, all of these issues. So I think we've seen some of those changes. For example, in Somaliland, their last election, every single candidate had a position against female genital mutilation. They've come into power, there's been no change yet, but at least they were talking about it. And it's important for that discourse, that secrecy be dispelled. So we are also talking about issues around women's empowerment, women's freedom, women's entitlement, women's safety, women's dignity. Look at the SDGs. Women's issues very clearly in the heart of SDG 5. So it's there, it's on the agenda. What now needs to happen is we need to see it through. We need to see it implemented so that every woman, every girl, everywhere has equality and is able to achieve that standard.
So you talk about, you just said every woman, every girl, everywhere. What
Yes.
do you say to those who might say, you know, let's start with something and some people, and eventually we will work our way, you know, towards reaching those goals? Because from what you're saying, it's about everyone, possibly at the same time, and really interlinking all the issues. Isn't that too much?
No, no. Because if we don't do it, it won't happen. And who do we leave behind? Who do we decide is not worthy of being in the first tranche? Everybody is worthy. What we need to do is look at how we use our money. And I'll use Corona as an example, the coronavirus. All of a sudden, there's enough money to look at creating vaccines, studies, researches, antivirals. If you can do that, then that means there is the will when there's a way. Where there's a will, there's a way. So if we put that much energy and that much investment into, and for forward, we would say young women, because the male, pale, stale paradigm has not worked. It hasn't worked. White men have been in leadership positions forever. Colonialism, patriarchy, power imbalance, it hasn't worked. We need a different paradigm. And for forward, that paradigm is young women's leadership, a new way of doing things with a new vision. So one of the things that we are working with is building that capacity in young African and Caribbean diaspora women, so that they are able to take up those spaces and places of power, make their views heard, to push the agenda of ensuring that we safeguard the dignity and rights of, for us as an organization, African women and girls everywhere, not only in Europe, but in Africa, everywhere we are.
So how, I guess, what is in the training, or what do you look at that you think has been a necessary foundation or blind side? Because in a way, there's a lot of leadership training out there. So what is the special touch or the different touch that you're bringing?
You are asking Coca-Cola to give you the formula for Coca-Cola. It doesn't work that way, no. But what we've discovered, seriously, is one of the key touch points is to start with the individual. A lot of training is about, let me give you the skills, let me give you the knowledge. But unless that person has spent time to look at deep within, you start from within, build that capacity to not only see themselves as critical to that change process, but also to look at their strengths, their weaknesses, not in a managerial kind of leadership way, but in a deep personal way, and then to build that link with the sisterhood and the community. But we have done it. We have seen that the first tranche of the Tuwezeshe leaders, that's what we call them, Tuwezeshe fellows, who have done the leadership training. we are beginning to see their impact. We are beginning to see them taking up places and spaces of power and doing it in a considered way. They are deeply immersed in the African feminist paradigm, which is what we need, and they are committed to making a change for African women and girls, for Black women and girls, for diaspora women and girls. So I think if we are able to manage this fellowship and to continue till we have a critical mass of young women who are able to take leadership positions, then we'll see the change we need to see.
So you're saying it is, okay, the personal is political. It's about looking at the individual, but then tap into the power of the collective.
Indeed, and changing the collective, because the collective may not always be outside the status quo. So you've got to make sure that the collective has a different vision and even the process of that change must be a feminist process. We can't keep doing power over. It's got to be collective, it's got to be empowering, it's got to be collaborative. That's the only way we can make sustained change. Because you can't drag communities into change. You've got to work with communities. You've got to work with faith and traditional leaders. You've got to work with all the stakeholders to create a sustained change.
My last question is, what keeps you going?
I've been blessed in a lot of ways to see some of the results of the young women we've been working with. And when I see the change in their lives, and the changes they are making in their communities, and the clarity of vision and their tenacity, that makes me happy. That reinforces the view that Forward is on the right track and that we've got the right strategy to make the change. And that's what keeps me going.
Thank you so much, Adwoa. Thank you for your time and for sharing all of this. Thanks.
Thank you.